Hello, and welcome to this webinar with Ladybird Education and Language World. So we're going to be looking at phonics today, and I think the key points here are phonics is a process and it's a journey for everyone involved. That's for the children, the teacher, and the parents. It's very much a step-by-step approach. We're starting small and we're building the foundations at each stage, like building a house. Each stage needs a lot of time, patience, and a lot of recycling. So with recycling, I mean reviewing, practicing, and consolidating. Recycling and consolidation needs to be short. So we need to think about timely activities that are quite short and condensed to keep motivation. Routine activities with recycling can be useful, so maybe at the beginning of the lesson or the end of the lesson. And most importantly, they need to be fun. And as you can see in this picture here, we have all of the words related to phonics. We've got trigraph, sound, grapheme, blending. We can see it's quite a long journey. So let's have a look a bit further. So how does the teaching of phonics work? So there are 26 letters in the alphabet, and they're represented by 44 sounds, otherwise known as phonemes. So the 44 sounds start the phonics journey. Some schools may differ in their approach, but most schools start with the individual letter sounds, and they are, as you can see, sat pin, as we have below. Now, there's a benefit here, because children can begin to make small words from these initial 6 letter sounds. So if we look a little bit further at satpin, we can see that this allows the children to combine and play with the letter sounds to make VC words, which are vowel consonant words, and CVC words, which are consonant vowel consonant words. So let's have a look at some examples. VC words, we've got at and it, and CVC words, we've got sit, mat, and pat. So if we look at satpin, we can see we've got at and it and in as VC words, and as CVC words, we've got sit, pat, and sat, for example. So this really allows the children to gain confidence relatively quickly using the method of satpin. So how the teaching of phonics works. So we always start with individual sounds, the letter sounds, before moving on to digraphs, which is 2 sounds. And generally, as I've said, most schools focus on satpin first. Children are encouraged to blend as much as possible. So blending is reading the whole world by putting individual sounds together. We also look at sounding out. And as you can see on this screen here, we've got the word bat. And children will be encouraged to say b, a, t, bat. We also look at different graphemes. So this is a written letter or group of letters. So the written symbol that represents the sound. Some graphemes are single letters like a, and some are digraphs like I. Digraphs will be a focus on 2 letters that make 1 sound together, like I and oo. So for example, we have some consonant digraphs such as ch and sh. Now, often these can be quite tricky for children, so you may spend a lot of time working on them. Of course, often it depends on the first language. And then we have vowel digraphs, as in e, oo, and I. Then we have trigraphs. So as children begin to go through their phonics journey, we can then start to look at these single sounds that are represented by 3 letters, such as I in night or ch in catch. There's always going to be some tricky words, and these tricky words are words that we cannot decode. And that would be such as the or was. Perhaps it's an idea to think of a colour or an action when we see a tricky word, to really allow children to notice that they can't decode it. And of course, we have high frequency words that we see all of the time, such as a or am, at, and are. So let's have a look at how to approach phonics in the classroom. So we see graphemes and we hear phonemes. So for an effective phonics journey, we need to consider the following points. Making it playful as much as possible. The more that we can add play for these young learners, the more that they will enjoy it and therefore remember it. Think about using physicality and actions and movement along with the sounds that we're learning. And again, this helps them to make connections and to remember. We can also use visuals, and visuals can be really powerful to allow learners to make connections. We may use a combination of all of this to differentiate learning in our classroom. We may want to use play, physicality, and visuals to ensure that all learners are understanding. We may want to consider personalizing words that have meaning to children. And this is what I call the power of personalization. If we know that our learners really enjoy a particular sport or hobby, then perhaps we can use the language from that and connect it to sounds that we're learning, because we know already this is something they're interested in and engaged by and motivated by. So this will help the learning process. Wherever possible, we need to make learning meaningful and relevant so children can make connections with their real life. And this will always help them with memorizing new sounds and words. So we can consider family, what children do every day, their daily routine, their habits, their hobbies, and all of this is meaningful and relevant language for them. Also, the classroom, this is also meaningful and relevant because they're in it every day. What objects are in the classroom and how can we connect that to particular sounds? Games. So games is a huge part of the phonics journey and actually any learning in the classroom. Games can really help bring phonics to life and they can help children remember what they've been learning. So we can use robot arms when sounding out words. And we've said actions and physical movement allow everyone to get involved and can make the process more memorable. It doesn't have to be robot arms. It could be any movement you want to use. We can consider using a sound race. So at the end of your phonics session, have a sound race. You place different sounds you've been working on around your classroom, and the children have to listen and then move to the correct sound. They can move in different ways. They could hop, jump, walk, run, crawl. So you can use lots of physicality here to make it interesting. Then once they're at the sound, they have a little bit of work to do. They can repeat the sound. They could give an example word that you've been focusing on with that sound, or they could mime the sound. And when they're miming, they're focusing on the correct mouth movements. And that is because some sounds will be really tricky because maybe they don't exist in the first language or they're quite different. If we look at some further games, a favourite is sound bingo. So rather than having a bingo card with lots of numbers, you have a bingo card with sounds. Now, you can simplify this or you can make it more difficult depending on where your learners are at in their phonics journey. You can also use pictures with sounds on this sound bingo chart. And perhaps for much younger learners at the beginning of their phonics journey, this will really facilitate the game. So this is a very short and interactive way to recycle and consolidate. You as the teacher will shout out the sounds and the learners look at their bingo chart and they have to circle or tick Once they have a line of sounds, they can shout bingo. And again, the line of sounds could be 3 or 4 or 5, depending on the level of the learners you're working with. You could then have a game that's focused purely on miming. So mime the sound and write it. So this is where children work in pairs. One child mimes the sound and the other child writes it on a small whiteboard and vice versa. So they both have a go. This can be really simplified if you don't have mini small whiteboards in your classroom by one child listening to the sound and the other child is drawing the sound in the air. So this is good in a low resource, no resource classroom. We can then look at the teacher says the sound, and here we're focusing on tactile and kinesthetic learning, and the children can make the sound. So this is very much a craft activity. The teacher says the sound, and the children have time to make that particular sound with Play-Doh, or they could draw the sound in a sandbox. I think with any class, we need to focus on what works best in that particular classroom. Different children respond very differently to different games and activities. So really consider approaches and games that you're using according to the preferences of your learners in the class. Always consider the differences between the first language and second language, or maybe even third language. There may be some sounds that need a lot more work and a lot more time because they're tricky. Maybe there are some sounds that are not in the first language, and therefore they will need a lot more support with that particular sound. Maybe even with the mouth movements and how to actually say that sound. As ever, think of fun actions for sounds, and this can be very personal for you in the classroom and your children. You can make up actions as you go along. You might have your own set of actions. What I like to use personally is if a sound is short, we clap. And if a sound is long, we imagine we're stretching chewing gum. Actions can make it fun and memorable and really help them with the differences in sounds. Consider using the names of your learners in your class. So rather than using words, you could use the names of the children that focus on particular sounds. And the reason this is beneficial is the children are always in class together. So therefore, there is meaning and an authentic use of language here. You could then develop this further by making actions for names of children with different sounds. And this can become a special routine or game for that particular class. And it allows for a more personalized learning experience. So as I said before, I'm a big believer in the power of personalization. You could then develop this further by playing a game we suggested before, but this time we're not playing sound bingo, we're playing name bingo, a way to focus on sounds. And it can be easier for children to make connections between the sounds and names of classmates rather than new words or new sounds with no connection. So, as ever, music is the top of my list. Music is fun and it's engaging and it can make sounds and language memorable for young learners. In fact, for any learners. So use music in your classroom. Now, I think the key point here is music doesn't need to be long. You could even use one line of a song that has the sound that you're focusing on. It doesn't need to be the whole song at all. And sometimes it's better to keep it short, especially if the learners are at the beginning of their phonics journey, because actually a whole song might be cognitive overload. It may just be too much. So break it down, maybe look at a line, look at a few lines first. Puppets. So puppets can be used in lots of different ways. You as the teacher could use a puppet and you could have different puppets that focus on different sounds. Using puppets can be a fun way to make dialogues that focus on particular sounds, using very simple language for young learners. We can also use puppets if learners are particularly shy. So perhaps the learners don't want to sound out a sound, or they don't want to give a sentence with a sound. But sometimes when we give them a puppet, they're acting as somebody else and not themselves. And sometimes this can really help with their motivation and kind of help combat the shyness a little bit, because they're not themselves, they're the puppet. And as ever with young learners, using crafts can really be beneficial in their phonics journey. We're allowing them to make something and do something when learning phonics, and that can be really, really beneficial. Okay, so as you can see on this slide, we have some dice, but this time we're going to change the dice a little bit. So rather than having number dice, we're going to have sound dice. So just you can stick sounds on each side of a dice, and there are so many different games that you could use this for. They can roll the dice and say the sound. They could roll the dice and give example words. They could roll the dice and whisper the sound to their partner, who then draws it in the air or on paper. So there's so many different things that you could do. And I think, again, this is just keeping it easy, keeping it simple, having an effective game that you can use in many different ways. So the sound dice can be really beneficial. Acting can make it fun, and I think as teachers we're always actors and actresses, so perhaps you as the teacher can act something out so the children can really remember it because it's fun and engaging, and you can maybe act a scene out with the children focusing on different sounds, or they could do it individually or together, and that can be lots and lots of fun in the classroom. And again, the notion of physicality can really help with memory and retention of particular sounds. And I'm always a big believer of giving any learner a choice and a voice. So let's think about giving our young learners a choice and a voice over what they want to do in the classroom. Rather than always telling them to do something in a particular way, let's give them a choice of activities, a choice of games. And I think sometimes this can be beneficial with engagement and motivation in the classroom. So rather than saying we're going to do this activity, maybe have 2 different activities or 3 and give the class a choice in what activity they would like to do. What's their preferred activity? This could be particularly useful at the end of the day when they're really, really tired and they need a bit of a boost. Let's just look at some top tips of how to approach phonics in the classroom. Now, there are many more that we can add to this list, but I think these are my favourites. The first one, as we've said through the slides, is the power of personalisation. Let's really personalise the language experience, the phonics experience for our learners, and that will help with engagement and motivation. KISS, keep it simple. Let's not overcomplicate anything for ourselves as the teacher or for the young learners. Think about making activities regular, so we do them on a regular basis, so the learners get to know them, and routine. This is building good learning habits, and I think for young learners, having routine activities can be really, really beneficial. As we said on the previous slide, let's give children choices in games and activities. And we can really see what they like the most. And this can help determine our lesson planning and how we approach different sounds and different activities by seeing what they really want to do. Of course, with anything related to language, we need to review it regularly. And as the saying goes, practice makes perfect. We don't just see a sound once, it's a journey, that step-by-step approach that we need to look at again and again and again. We need to use a combination of everything to make sure that the learners grasp the phonics and the sounds. So we may use songs and movements and crafts, lots of different activities to really motivate our young learners. We follow a step-by-step approach to make it much easier. And as we've said, we need to make meaningful connections between sounds, words, and their lives. So think about family is meaningful to young learners, their hobbies, their daily routine, the school and the classroom. These are all things that they live daily, language that they hear daily, things that they see on a daily basis. So this is making that meaningful connection. And of course, as always, reading is a huge part of the phonics journey. And we want to foster a lifelong love of reading with our young learners. So we want to encourage reading both in the classroom and outside the classroom for maximum success. I think always the best way to raise awareness of sounds and reading is through fun activities that promote speaking, listening, and lots of communication. So play will always be at the top of the list for young learners. And I think the physical literacy aspect of the Actiphons means there's lots of opportunity for play. Always think about meaningful words and language, and this helps learners make connections. Think of everyday objects that they can relate to. So what have they seen in the book? How can they relate that to something in their bedroom or something in the living room at home or in their classroom? And if you are in the classroom, your classroom, just like your home, if you're at home, is a huge resource. There are so many objects that you can use in the reading of a book to help with vocabulary or to help with a particular sound. So this is a lovely activity to do, and this is called the scavenger hunt. And again, this is very much promoting play on the reading journey. So you can put items around your classroom or at home, if you're at home. And think of items with sounds that you have been learning in the book. And again, there's different ways that you can use this game. Your young learner could find the item that you've hidden somewhere, and they have to say the word, or they could mime the word, or they could just say the sound. They could find the item and jump up and down saying the sound and the word. And again, this is promoting the idea of physical literacy, movement. You could, if there's more than one young learner, give them a basket. And this time they need to collect the items according to the sounds, group together, and then go through the items in the basket. So then they take them out, they say the word, then they focus on the sound. So if they're at the beginning of the reading and phonics journey, you could just have all the same sounds in the basket. Then, as they start to increase their knowledge, you can mix up all of the sounds. And this is just, again, quite a tactile and kinesthetic way to look at and practice different sounds. And again, you can do this in so many different ways. This could be done at home. It could be a fun activity in the classroom, or maybe at the weekend if you go to the park. How many objects can you find in the park? Make a scavenger hunt and do exactly the same thing. A tactile and physical approach can be really, really beneficial for learners. And you can see in this picture on the slide, there are many blocks. So what you can do is collect blocks and either write on them or put a sticker on them of particular sounds. And you can ask the learners to pick up a block and they have to say the sound, give you a word with the sound. There's many, many things that you can do. And this can really help with motor skills. It's fun and it's engaging and it's a different way to remember key sounds or even words from the book that you've been focusing on at home or in the class. This could be done with individual phonemes or multiple phonemes at higher levels. And at higher levels, maybe level 2 or level 3, you can have lots of fun here with blending. So each block has a different letter, a different sound, and the young learners have to make short 3-letter words and focus on blending. And this is a really good way to increase their vocabulary and increase their knowledge of sounds. So you can see a very simple example at the bottom of this slide is cat. So that means we would have 3 blocks. Ka, a, ta. They blend it together and they have the word cat. So I think in the reading journey and the phonics journey, we need to take a step-by-step approach. Each letter and its sound should be introduced in sequence so that children can build on what they've learned and help them make progress. And again, similarly to what we've looked at before, introduce the sound, first of all. Say the sound, write the sound, mime the sound, draw the sound in the air and get your young learners to do the same thing. If there is more than one young learner, they could be back to back and they could draw the sound just with their finger on the back of another child. You could turn to maybe craft activities where they make the sound out of leaves, paint, beads, blocks, whatever you can find. But it's just another way to focus and to consolidate. And of course, they could write and repeat. So of course, we introduce the sound first, but you could change the order of how you do it depending on your young learner. What do they like? What do they prefer? What engages them the most? And that's the most important thing. If you find a technique that works, use it. So again, this is a fun thing to do, and I'm a big believer in fun in the classroom, not just for reading, but actually with anything we're doing. So when a group of words starts with the same letter sound, we call it alliteration. So practicing alliteration can help children to identify the first letter sound of a word. So we've got some funny examples here. The first one says, walking Wendy wandered to the wild water. So of course we're practicing "wa" here. Then we've got dancing daisies, dotty dinosaurs are dancing. So they're quite fun. There's a real focus on moving the mouth to produce the correct sound. What I think is a lovely idea is to use the names of the learners in the class, or if you're at home, you could use the names of everybody in your family and do exactly the same activity. It's quite fun. The learners have to think about it. So I'm Dani. So my example here is dancing Dani drove to the dentist. So again, it's a fun activity. You can do it at home. You can do it in the classroom. And it's another way to really focus on sounds. So have a go at practicing alliteration, perhaps with sounds that you've done already and you want to consolidate or practice, or perhaps a sound that is a little bit tricky for your young learner. And this could be a different way of focusing on it away from the book. Okay, so now we're going to look at the Realia tray. So Realia is a word for real life objects or props that perhaps you may use to help your young learner to understand something. So what we can do here is think about the reading book. So think about a book from the Actiphons range. What you can do as a parent or a teacher is go through the book and find objects that connect to the book and have them on a tray. Or if you're just focusing on phonics, not reading, you can find different objects related to the sound or the sounds that you're focusing on in the class. And this is great for learners. You can have a big tray or a big table with lots of Realia at the front of your class. The young learner can pick up the object and say the sound. They could find an object with the ah sound, for example. They could pick up an object and sound out the word. So perhaps think about 3-letter words and they have to blend. You could take some of the objects away, and this is a good memory activity. Are they focused? Are they concentrating? What sound has disappeared? Another useful activity is to ask young learners to bring in objects, whether you're at home or at school. Find an object focusing on a key sound, use them. And at school, you could do this with show and tell or circle time. And you could do exactly the same thing at home. So this slide is talking about particular sounds, but you can do exactly the same with vocabulary items from a book to really help the reading process. So in the same way, you have a big tray, a big table, and you find different objects related to the book. So this could be vocabulary items from the book. And you do exactly the same thing. This time, it's slightly different. The learners have to pick up an object and talk about how it connects to the book. Can you remember what happened? Can you give me a sentence? What happens next? The idea of using Realia or real life objects is they're tactile and kinesthetic, and it's a different focus that can be really, really useful. So this is an example here from one of the Actiphon books, and you can see we've got Annie. So our character is Annie, and it says, Annie finds a tin of soup in her bag. It is the tin. So what you can do at home or in the classroom is find a tin, maybe specifically a tin of soup. And you can hold it up and say a tin of soup. You can get them to repeat the sound. And then perhaps you could blend tin. So when you're reading the Actiphon series, have a look. What objects can you find at home or at school that can help bring the book to life and help the reading process? This is one of my favorite things to do in the classroom, and this is called the snowball fight, okay? But we're not using any snow. We're just using some paper, preferably paper from the recycling bin, okay? So what we have to do is to write sounds on a piece of paper and scrunch them up into a ball. And this paper ball then becomes our snowball. If you're in a classroom, give each learner a snowball and they have to throw the snowballs. So we've got this action of physical literacy in here again. Then they have to pick up some of the snowballs, open them up. What is the sound? Then they can say the sound. Again, they can draw it in the air. They can say it to a friend, or they could say it to the class together. You can do exactly the same thing at home, and you could maybe have sounds that you've looked at in a previous book. And this is a fun way to consolidate, recycle, and see if they've remembered. Similarly, for reading and vocabulary, you can do exactly the same thing. So rather than using the snowballs with a sound, you're using the snowballs with characters or words from the book. And this can be a good way to get your young learner to remember what happened in the book. Can you remember? Can you tell me? And we're using the snowballs as little hints and clues to see how much they've remembered. And most young learners love this, just the action of snowballs and throwing them. So have a go. It's a really good way to practice and consolidate either sounds or characters and words from the book to get your young learners to tell you, to summarize really about what happened in a book. What can they remember? Okay, so this can be used in two ways to keep them moving. If you're in the classroom, your classroom will be your resource. If you're at home, it may be your living room, your dining room, or perhaps your garden outside. And this is because anything in the classroom or your home, the items have meaning to learners because they're things that they see every single day. And I think in good teaching, we need to ensure that everything is meaningful, relevant, purposeful, and authentic to our learners. So you can see this classroom here. We've got the board, so we've got the bus sound, we've got the desk, we've got the duh sound, we've got the bag, another bus sound. Similarly, exactly the same in your home. How many items can they think of? And what are the particular sounds of those items? And again, they could stand up and move around. You could say to the young learner, find the bus sound, and they have to find something in the classroom or the home or the garden, and then they have to move around as much as possible. So again, this idea of physical literacy, not just sitting down, moving to make it engaging, memorable, and lots of fun. And again, if we're keeping them moving, let's use all of the wonderful actions in the Actiphons range, but let's also use some of our own. So how many different actions can we think of to make it engaging for our learners to remember a particular sound? So maybe they could run to a sound or walk to a sound. Maybe they could crawl to a sound or hop to the sound. They could jump to the sound or swim to the sound, pretending to swim. Or perhaps they could dance to the sound. What you could do in this activity in your home or in the classroom is make flashcards or use the Actiphons flashcards and have them on different walls or different spaces in your home, your garden, or your classroom. You give instructions and the learners have to do the appropriate action. They recognize the sound and they move to it. Where is it? Okay, so this could be a good way to practice multiple sounds in one go. And again, anyone can do this. It can be done with a parent, a teacher, even two learners could do it with friends together. And again, it's just that notion of keeping them moving to really help them with their reading and phonics journey. So this is another example here, and you can see from the Actiphons range, we've got a lovely book here, and it says, he whistles to himself as he walks down the forest path. This is Raph. So our character here is Raph. So Raph huffs and puffs. So we've got our sound here. You could ask your learners to get up and act it out. So Raph huffs and puffs. And of course, when we're reading a story or when we're focusing on a particular sound, exaggeration can be really good. So changing the tone of our voice, exaggerating, making it louder. Raph huffs and puffs. Everyone huffs and puffs. So get them up and get them acting it out can be really useful. They're making connections with physical activity to what they can see in the book. Again, here outside is a great way to learn reading and language and sounds. So take the phonics outside and involve movement activities, similarly to the ones that we've looked at so far. You can use your own movement activities, or you could really focus on the actions from each Actiphons book. So again, find the item, say the sound and the word. Find the item and jump up and down, saying the sound and the word. So this could be a fun activity in the park after school, maybe at lunchtime, many different ways. And it doesn't need to be a long activity. All of these keeping moving activities can be short and focused. So perhaps 5 minutes, but that 5 minutes is still a way to consolidate something that you're looking at. So we looked earlier about miming and the videos that they have in the Actiphons range. So miming is a focus on how the mouth moves with each sound. And this is essential because some sounds may be really tricky. So focus on miming the letters rather than just repeating until they've really grasped it. So you can use the videos in the Actiphons range to show the miming, and this can help you as well to make sure you're getting the sound right. And this is really important for sounds that are different or non-existent in the first language. So here, let's have a go. So this is useful for sounds that exist in English and maybe not in the first language. So let's have a go at miming. So here we've got so you can see I'm not vocalizing anything, I'm just miming. And again, with our other character. And again, we're trying to get them to focus. They could point. Am I using my lips, my tongue, my teeth? So let's just have a look at reading itself. So within these Actiphon books, we've got some brilliant stories for the reading journey. And I always think it's useful to break reading down into 3 parts to keep our learners engaged and motivated, actually at any age and level. So pre-reading, what can you do before you open the book to make it fun and to capture their attention? So here you can see one of the front covers from the book. We've got Karate Kim. Use the front cover and talk about it. What does she look like? What is she doing? What's her name? What do you think the sound is? Can we make some predictions? What do you think is going to happen in the book? You can also focus on real life by asking children, have you ever done karate? Would you like to do karate? And what we're doing here is we're setting the scene. We're kind of contextualizing before any reading takes place. And again, you have all this in your packs to look at. And there is advice here, as you can see, in more detail about what you should do before reading. And it goes through everything very carefully. So we won't look at all of them, but if we look at some, it says, ask your child to trace the letters in the character's name on the cover as they say each sound. So you have the front cover of the book and they're tracing in the air with their finger. So we're introducing them to the sound before we start reading. Whilst reading, obviously the most important bit, reading to capture their attention, to get them really interested in each page and what's happening. And of course, the language in the book and, you know, any new vocabulary. So we can read and repeat. We can act it out. Focus on the visuals. As you can see here from this example from the Actiphons range, the visuals match the words. So this is really useful for learners in their beginning journey of their reading. So the kite rises and glides. Where's the kite? Point to the kite. What a fine sight. So again, get them to point, get them to say the words. You can read aloud and then read aloud together, focusing on a particular word or the sound. Bring the book to life by making a kite, or again, making those connections to real life. Have you ever used a kite? Do you have a kite? Have you ever seen someone flying a kite? So make those meaningful connections. And again, during reading or whilst reading, you have guidance. So at every step, you have guidance on what to do to really maximize this reading journey. So again, there's quite a lot on this page, but maybe if we just think about one of them, when something happens to the characters, how do you think they feel? Or what would you do that happened to you? So lots of questions, lots of advice about what you can do whilst reading. And this can be really, really useful, especially if you have a reluctant reader. And then we have post-reading. Now, it's not about closing the book and finishing. You know, there may be a lot of new vocabulary in the book that we need to review and consolidate. We may need to look at the sounds again and again and again. So there's lots of tips and advice in the actual book. As you can see here, it says, what next? Think about some of the activities we've looked at today. Use real life objects to maybe recreate the whole story. And then your young learner has to tell you about the whole story, lifting the real life objects, showing you and helping them to remember everything that happened in the book. You could also think about other activities we've looked at today, like the scavenger hunt, snowballs, or using blocks. So here you can see the example from the Actiphons book, What Next? It says talk about it. So we're kind of using communicative skills to talk about what happened. What did Karate Kim stand on during the competition? Who won the competition in the end? So questions to get them to remember. Then we could focus specifically on phonics and sounds. And of course, physical literacy is here again. Get active. So it says at the bottom, you have to be strong to do karate. Show your child how to hold a plank position. And then it gives you advice on how to do that. So again, we've got that movement that's related to Karate Kim within the story. And again, you have the guidance. what other things can you do post-reading? You can do lots of talking. You can get your child to remember. This could be a brilliant opportunity to do some singing, to use the songbooks to consolidate everything they've learnt from the book. And of course, we definitely need to celebrate. When they've finished a book, that's a huge celebration. So remember the certificates and the reward charts that are really, really useful to use. And of course, you as the teacher or the parent giving lots and lots of praise to really help them want to continue in their reading journey. So you can see here, Actiphons and reading. We've just got another example here of Karate Kim. So it says, Karate Kim loves to do karate. I got in the kit. I am on the mat. So, of course, the Actiphon series provide fun titles to help learners on their reading journey. And this is really important. They're fun and engaging. The books combine fun titles and phonics at the same time. The characters and titles are relevant, meaningful, and authentic to experiences learners will have in their everyday life. And this is hugely important. It allows them to make connections, as we've said during this webinar. And I think this makes a powerful reading experience where learners can connect their own life experiences to items from the book. And this can be beneficial. So here we've got karate. Again, have you ever done karate? Would you like to do karate? If they haven't, we've got a mat. What other things do you do on the mat? Do you do gymnastics? Do you do athletics? And so forth. So I think to round off this webinar, I would say, not just for teaching phonics, but also for teaching reading, we have to make it fun. And of course, that will be different for every child. So really focus on what your particular young learner enjoys, likes, and what engages them the most. I like to say use the KISS method, which is keep it simple. Any activities, any questions, make sure they're quite simple so we're not overloading our young learners. We need to think about the pace of activities with young learners. Keep the activities short, and exactly the same with any task. Keep them quite short. Routine can be really useful. So perhaps there's something you do at a particular time every day in the same way. And that routine can be really beneficial for the reading journey, for learning sounds, for learning vocabulary. Make things as interactive as you can. And I think this is where the Actiphon range really shines. The notion of physical literacy is really beneficial to keep it interactive. As we've said in some of the suggested activities, use Realia, real life objects. You're bringing a book to life, and that can be hugely beneficial. Use play, of course, and lots of songs. And of course, here you have the songbooks that you can use. Perhaps you could make your own song to go along with some of the books. And use extra physical literacy, just like the actions in the Actiphon series. Maybe you could think of some of your own physical activities that you could use and do to really help your learners on their reading and phonics journey. And that brings us to the end of the webinar. Please be sure to visit www.ladybirdeducation.co.uk. Thank you very much.
An elephant. Dog.
Yeah, drop the beat. 1,